Well, I mean, obviously, I think I'm best known for being the singer and the keyboard player in the rock group Styx. I think more than anything, that's what people know me as.
Well, of course, I would say I'm probably most well known for being the singer and keyboard player with the rock band Styx. I think more than anything else, that's what people know me as. Imagine this, 1979. Styx is performing Madison Square Garden. Tens of thousands of fans singing along to Dennis DeYoung's unmistakable voice on Come Sail Away. The lights are flashing, the power is electric, and the band appears to be at the pinnacle of the world. But behind the scenes, cold steps, quiet battles, shattered trust. While DeYoung had been the band's voice, he was gradually turning into the outsider. Now, decades after the silence, Dennis DeYoung is no longer pulling punches. What he says about Styx's is not merely startling. It alters everything the fans believe they understood about the band. In the beginning, Styx's was a dream that originated on Chicago streets. DeYoung, his brother-in-law John Kurolowski, and the Panonzo brothers formed the foundation. Then Tommy Shaw arrived, the catalyst that would fuel both success and splits. DeYoung was intense, driven, a visionary. He was not merely a keyboardist, he was the architect of the band. He craved the dramatic, the grand ideas, perfection. But this artistic urge quickly became a chasm. Tommy Shaw and James J.Y. Young did not crave Broadway. They craved scorching guitars and hard rock intensity. Rehearsals became arena conflicts. Choices became combat. The harmony out front hid the war. Behind it, Styx teetered on the brink of change and annihilation. With Kilroy was here Dennis DeYoung was not merely writing songs. He was creating a rock opera, a theatrical defiance of censorship and conformity. Synth-driven, dramatic, conceptual. It was everything DeYoung wished for, but to Tommy Shaw and James J.Y. Young, it was a nightmare they could not awaken from. DeYoung invested his heart and soul in Kilroy, writing dystopian roles, creating elaborate stage shows, and insisting on theatrical performance from band members who never enrolled in acting school. Tommy Shaw most of all felt stifled, not only creatively but as a person. Once the rock and roll firebrand of the band, he was now wearing a costume, reading scripted dialogues, and playing out DeYoung's techno fantasies in scorching lights. Backstage, tensions were volcanic. Shaw allegedly became distant and irascible, no longer recognizing the band that he was once so fond of. He became depressed. Young was more and more frustrated with DeYoung's need for control. What rehearsals should have been were rehearsed arguments. Each soundcheck resembled a war zone. Each concert a reluctant performance. Fans were perplexed. Critics split. Internally, Styx's was burning but not well. On stage, they performed as a group. Off stage, they rode in silence, in different hotels, in different cars, and hardly looking each other in the eye. The glue that had them together had turned to ego, fear, and bitterness. And, I said sometimes in life as you grow up and age, if you've got a dream, sometimes your dreams have to change. If a particular dream isn't working for you, then throughout the tour things blew up. Arguments became vicious. Physical altercations almost broke out. Shaw, drained emotionally and creatively repressed, couldn't take it anymore. He walked away not only from the album, but from the band. The breakup was sudden and it was vicious. Kilroy was intended to take Styx to another level of art. Instead, it fractured them in half. The album that represented DeYoung's artistic vision became the emblem of the disintegration of the band. What had previously made Styx bold and distinctive, DeYoung's grandiose imagination, now made him a target. And in the aftermath, Dennis DeYoung was alone. Not as a hero, not as a leader, but as a man to blame for ruining what he helped create. By the late 1990s, buzz on the fan site was deafening. Rumors of a Styx reunion were buzzing, and fans were clamoring to see the classic configuration, particularly Dennis DeYoung, perform again. For after all, he was the band's heart and soul, its initial visionary. DeYoung, in recovery from sickness and set to return, genuinely thought it was time to renew the brotherhood. He waited. He hoped. but what was to follow would shatter whatever confidence he had in the individuals he knew to be his friends. Rather than answer the phone or lend a hand, Tommy Shaw and James J.Y. Young made a backroom decision to keep Styx rolling without its original voice. And more than that, they brought on a new lead singer, someone who could replicate Dennis's iconic vocals, mimic his dramatic moves, and cover his songs note for note. It wasn't about creativity. It was about replacement. It was cold, calculated, and corporate. And it fell on D, young like a dagger. Fans were shocked. Headlines screamed like betrayal. The artist who gave Styx's its sound, its biggest hits, and its identity was no longer part of the family. The betrayal was final when the group started touring as Styx, playing classics such as Babe the Best of Times and Come Sail Away, all written or co-written by D. Young, with not even a nod of recognition of the man who composed them. And Young, he sat at home and observed it all from the sidelines, still recovering from his sickness, still hoping. Naively, some would say that they would act properly, but rather, he was handled as a liability, a burden, a name they did not need anymore. He reached out, attempted to understand, but peace had no place there, no desire for resolution. What had begun with 80s creative differences had evolved into a blood feud of the emotional kind. Legal battles soon ensued, battles over the use of a name, over songwriting credits, over performance rights. Each suit, each lawyer's letter added to the bitterness. Interviews became venomous. Terms such as ego control freak and delusional were thrown about in the media. The harm was done. And thus, as the band continued on with a well-chosen image and a new generation, Dennis DeYoung slipped back into obscurity, not by his own volition, but by necessity. His reputation, once boisterous and shining, was being redefined in the moment, not in truth, but in silence. For DeYoung, the betrayal was not merely professional. It was searingly, intensely personal, and it would plague him for decades. As Styx's name still filled theaters, Dennis DeYoung was waging a war of unpublicized prose, not only against his former band members, but also against his own flesh. His life came to a chilling standstill in the late 1990s when he contracted an enigmatic illness. He developed light hypersensitivity, unable to play, record, or even venture outside his home without becoming ill and disoriented. Months were spent in the dark, literally. Blinds shut, lights off, music silenced. And then it occurred. At his lowest point, when he was weakest, the last members of Styx's did something that destroyed him. They went on without him. He wasn't merely left behind. He was replaced. As he recuperated, body and soul shattered, the machine rolled right along. His voice, his presence, his identity took a back seat and were relegated to obscurity. And that hurt so much more than any disease. The music business, always fueled by momentum, didn't wait for him either. Agencies calling. Promoters disappeared. Venues canceled solo engagements. His name, which had been a standard, was now deemed too volatile, too complicated. He became a ghost in his own tale, a headlining star-turned-specter. The betrayal, however, went beyond professional. It was personally intimate. The men who had been like brothers turned against him as if he were nothing more than a throwaway. And as the Styx brand kept growing without him, he was relegated to watching from the sidelines. His own legacy marched around without thankfulness or credit. Depression set in. His marriage struggled with worry, bewilderment, and emotional disintegration. There were mornings when he allegedly would not leave bed. Music, which had once been his refuge, was now a source of sorrow. Even playing the piano seemed like raking up old wounds. But Dennis DeYoung is not a man who breaks quietly. Over time, he started to retaliate, not in lawsuits or bitterness, but through art. He started writing again in a slow manner. Initially, he tried his hand at theater, wrote new songs, and wrote stories that spoke about the heartbreak he went through. Out of pain was born creativity. Out of betrayal came strength. And yet the scars were there. Even years afterward, when he gave public speeches, there was a weight to his words. The burden of being taken away from something he had created with his own two hands. His disease may have disappeared, But the recollection of being cast aside when he was most human, most fractured, never really healed. Dennis DeYoung's flame did not burn out when Styx's shoved him aside. It merely diverged. But the same passion that made him a master of the stage became a disadvantage in the privacy of his own home. Once Styx's was off his battlefront, his battle extended far and wide into boardrooms, production meetings, and his own home. He fought record label executives who sought to tame his solo persona when they asked him to tone down his theatricality. He wouldn't. One executive is said to have deemed him unmanageable. Producers on every project from studio albums to stage shows tended to walk away spent and disillusioned. He applied the same energy and zeal for cleanliness and love to every note, every lighting change, every costume, and not everybody could keep pace. When he plunged into musical theater in the 1990s and early 2000s, DeYoung prayed for a rebirth. His rock musical, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, developed a cult following, but insiders gossiped about marathon rehearsals, rewrites, and DeYoung's intransigence in accepting direction. Some were in awe of his vision, others couldn't bear it. Collaborations ended in frustration. For DeYoung, compromise equaled betrayal. The struggles didn't end at the stage door. At home, old grievances about money inheritances and professional choice started to resurface. There were fights about business decisions, about loyalty, and about who really believed in him. His intense fixation on his legacy, on being remembered properly, consumed him. Sometimes it overshadowed everything. One day he was warm and charismatic. The next, he was cold and combative. Close friends began to withdraw. Some stopped answering calls. Others quietly distanced themselves, unable to bear seeing him plunge deeper into solitude. Those who stayed witness to a man combat ghosts, the treachery of Styx's, the apathy of the industry, the silence of once solid allies. The harder he battled for validation, the more isolating it became around him. In trying to own the tail of his own tail, DeYoung ended up shoving away the same individuals who once had his back. It was no longer a fight for respect. Musically, it was a war to be viewed, heard, and remembered, and one that had a price no gold record could wash away. Dennis DeYoung is today at an odd fork in the road, adored by countless fans, but irrevocably pushed aside by the band he helped form and mold. His solo albums still garner critical acclaim. His ballads still fill wedding receptions. His voice is still instantly recognizable and iconic. But when Styx's appears on stage today, it's like he was never here. Beneath the applause is an ocean of individual sorrow. DeYoung didn't lose a band, he lost brothers. What was once a family became a cold machine. Shaw and Young, two creative brethren, are now like ghosts from another time, inaccessible and emotionally departed. They don't talk. They don't react. No apology, no closure, only silence. And the bite of erasure. And yet the betrayal did not destroy him, not entirely. He retreated. He grieved. But he also worked. He funneled the hurt into music, solo work, orchestral tours, and narrative. Every song he sings now is infused with a greater truth. A man attempting to reclaim not only his name, but his legacy. He constructed Styx's out of a Chicago basement. He infused it with heart, with drama, and with voice. And while others may persist under that same name, they can't erase the fingerprints he put on every album, every lyric, every note. Now, with time running out and stage lights growing dim, DeYoung is talking freely. The pain, the betrayal, the exile, it's all coming out not for vengeance, but for truth. Because the last curtain is not so much about conclusion, it's about legacy. And Dennis